Hello everybody, my name is Tomo Fletcher. I am the Vice President of Research and Development here at Crank Software, and today I have the pleasure of talking to you about our upcoming Storyboard Suite 5.0 release. So this is a webinar that is both catering to new Storyboard entrants as well as existing Storyboard customers. So just to give you a little bit of background on who Crank Software is and what Storyboard Suite is all about. Storyboard Suite is Crank Software's main product. It is focused on easing UI development for embedded systems. It is a design tool that is a desktop design tool, as well as a optimized runtime engine for embedded targets. Crank Software itself has been around for 10 years, and we're up here in Ottawa, and today it is a delightfully sunny and snowy day. So we may have a few technical challenges when we get into the target webcam, so you have to bear with us a little bit. Crank Software provides design services, application development services, as well as custom engineering services in addition to our main Storyboard Suite product. So we do all things embedded UI. So before we jump into the demo, I just want to kind of talk through a little bit of the motivation on Storyboard and where we're coming from. And really, the Storyboard Suite product is heavily motivated by changes that are affecting UI development today, in particular embedded UI development. It's this notion that because of mobile devices, because of tablet-based devices, expectations around what a display should be capable of showing me, how I interact with it, is really driving towards very rich animated designs, right? These are designs which are finely crafted, and this is, this is the norm. This is the new standard. And because this is the new standard, you're seeing that product development teams are evolving to start including as not just a, kind of a token participatory member, but as a full-fledged, throughout the whole product lifetime, member of the team, graphic designers and usability experts. And these are people who are coming in and they are crafting the user experience. They are developing the presentation, developing the graphics, and they are an essential part of now the product development process. And because they're on the team, because they're full-fledged members and they're there for the lifetime of the product, we're also seeing that graphic content is no longer really something that is, this generate once and wave your hands and wait for the product to come out the other side. It's not just being created and handed off, but it's something that is iterating and evolving through the lifetime of your products. And that kind of, that series of changes has led us to some core beliefs when we were building up our Storyboard Suite product. And that's this notion that developers and designers are really equals. And what we mean here is that they have equal ownership and delivery responsibilities on the product, that they have equal capability of participating throughout the product's lifetime, and that they're equally empowered to deliver the best product possible. And part of that, right, when we look at it from the user interface perspective, from the UI perspective, is that if you are trying to deliver the best product possible, that you are going to go through some design change, right? This is something which is, totally expected in the software development world, but on the UI side has not historically been something that's been readily made available, right? It's very difficult sometimes for changes to be quickly applied and seen in the end product. So we embrace this notion of change. And the change may be motivated because you're going out and you're doing field trials and you're collecting user feedback. It may also be because it's part of a branding exercise. You're changing the look of the product. You're changing the feel because of a new revision. And it could also be it's a pure cosmetic style change, right? The fad of the day in terms of what's cool and what looks great has changed. And that kind of goes in line with this this idea that expectations are always increasing. Right? Once we started seeing rich user interfaces in the palm of our hand in the mobile platform world, the expectation was that I could take that same sort of user interface experience and I should be able to see it on my thermostat. I should be able to see it on my microwave, on my oven. I should be able to see it on my appliances. Why not see it on my smartwatch, right? Anytime that I start seeing a display, my expectation is that the experience that I had with other devices is going to come through to that, right? And so we take this set of core beliefs in terms of how products are being designed today and how they're going to be designed in the future, and we turn it into, kind of our main product development motivation, right? And this is where we like to think that Storyboard offers a different approach to embedded UI development than what has historically been available. I'm going to talk through some of these points here, but I'm going to talk about them in the context of Storyboard 5, right? We're going to be right into the product in a few moments here. We're going to be doing some live demos. So what I want to do is I just want to kind of highlight some of the bullet points, because we have an hour together today. And in an hour, we're going to get through an awful lot of content. We're going to go and we're going to build up a real live application, and we're going to take it and we're going to deploy it down to a piece of target hardware. But there's a lot of functionality that's been introduced to Storyboard 5 that we won't be able to touch on today. So just, when it comes to allowing engineers and designers to work together effectively, Storyboard is a great collaborative environment for that. What we've introduced with 5.0 is some features that allow, a little bit more of the engineering aspect, a little bit more of the custom aspect to come through in our Canvas render extension. It's always a challenge trying to get communication between your UI and your backend working smoothly and effectively. So we've, kind of improved the workflow there. One of the things that you'll see is that the ability to really finely tune your animation rates and what that looks like. And of course, testing, validation, being able to simulate is something which we've put a lot of work and effort into the Storyboard product from the very beginning of its life. And that gets even easier with this release because we've introduced some additional functionality into our generation and receiving functions, IOGen and IReceive, as well as our SB-Lua module. Storyboard also embraces change, right? We feel that, as I mentioned, change is inevitable in a UI, whether that's because everybody has an opinion on a user interface, or whether that's because user interfaces are very subject to sort of fads and changes in style. But in any case, whatever the reason for the change, whatever the development process you're going through, you're going to find there are features in Storyboard 5 which are going to help you out with that. So part of what you're going to see here is that we've really expedited the export experience. We've consolidated what was a growing list of export options, and we've added to that with this release. We are improving the ability to take your simulated application and be able to drive it out to a target. If you've got a network-connected target, you're going to be able to take from within the Storyboard design environment, take it, export it, push it over an SCP connection over the network, and run it and execute it. And that's what we're going to be doing today. If you're a Windows user, if you're a Windows platform user, historically, if you wanted to take your Storyboard application and share it with a team, kind of put it out to a series of marketing individuals, perhaps for evaluation, we had a standalone installer that you could install and achieve that. We've taken that and we've incorporated it now directly into the Storyboard experience, so you can generate a standalone executable that is self-contained, contains your model, contains the runtime engine, everything you need to be able to give it out for people to try out on their desktop systems. One of the huge changes is our introduction of components, right? We're not calling these widgets because they're not widgets. They're more powerful than widgets. They are components that allow you to use your own artwork, your own custom visual effects, to quickly integrate pre-built modules into a user interface. And so we're going to see how that comes together today. These have existed in previous releases of Storyboard as templates. What we're doing now is we're actually packaging several components with Storyboard as a baseline for you to take and modify. You're also going to see during the course of use that there have been some refinements and some improvements to some of our collaboration, the Photoshop imports, re-imports. Really, there are very few areas of Storyboard that haven't received some sort of a tweak or a bug fix or an improvement. And finally, we're not really deviating from our roots at all. Storyboard 5 continues to be focused on embedded systems, and efficiency and optimization is always, kind of foremost in our mind when we're talking about functionality for these deep embedded targets. And to that end, we are introducing new hardware support and new operating system support for a number of different platforms with this release. These have been available in some capacity as previews or specific customer releases, but now they're going to be widely available. This includes support for the IMX7, the new platform from NXP, the STM Accordo, as well as operating system support for ThreadX, MQX, and MuCOS, and that's a typo, that should read MuCOS 3. We've had MuCOS 2 support for quite some time now. Other things that are very directly related to executing on a target is the support for precompiled Lua scripts. Now, this might give you a little bit of a performance boost, a little improvement at your startup time, but in many cases, customers are also asking for it so that they can hide some of their logic. They can obfuscate, what their application is doing. Along the similar line, we're also offering a new export mechanism that allows you to take an entire storyboard model, all of its assets, its fonts, its resources, and put it together into a single archive. Both an encrypted archive option or a non-encrypted archive option are available. Of course, on certain platforms, that could result in a bit of a performance hit, but it might be overweighed by your security concerns. Also new is that we are rolling out very broad support for video playback and audio playback within the context of video using the FFmpeg software decoder. We've had GStreamer hardware accelerated video support for a number of years. What we're doing now is we're packaging up as part of our media offering an FFmpeg software decoder that can work on hardware environments that are not necessarily GStreamer enabled. There's also some things in here. You're going to see a lot of small little features that have been kind of pulled out from work that we've been doing with these deeper, what we call our real-time executive platforms, our RTOS SDK platforms, and things like being able to do image-to-fill conversions as a broad-based refactoring to improve performance. So I don't want to spend all day in slides. So I'm going to leave this. I'll probably come back to this at the end so that you can kind of figure out how you can get your evaluation copy. But what I really want to do now is I want to escape out of these slides and I want to get right into Storyboard. Right? So Storyboard 5, you're going to see is a familiar environment. Excuse me. We're still working in an Eclipse-based system. Our version of Eclipse is updated. We're now using the Neon version of Eclipse, which is the most recent version. And let's jump right in to what the new flavor looks like. So right away, if you're familiar with Storyboard, historical versions, when you first started up Storyboard, you used to see a very blank, kind of stark white workspace, not giving you a lot of ideas on where to go. So we fixed that by introducing, some functionality into our application model, so that you're guided along the path as you're building up your new functionality. We're going to jump in. We're going to go through and start a project from Photoshop. What we're going to do is we're going to actually build a live application. In this case, I'm going to be working with a sample that my graphic designer has provided to me, and that sample is going to be a simplified washing machine. Right? So I can go through, bring in my Photoshop files, I can import my content here as text layers. Not a lot of change in this workflow. And right away, again, I end up with a visual representation of my Photoshop file. If you're an engineer, this is fantastic, right? Because you haven't had the ability to just kind of pull these assets out. Typically, you need to have your own Photoshop license. So I can see here, I've got my elements. I can come in, I can turn these off, on, right? I don't want to have the cycles group for right now, so I'm going to leave that off. one thing that, if you're used to seeing what we do in Storyboard, is that we've often been asked, is it possible to kind of lock down some functionality? I don't want to, once I've made some changes, I don't want to have that functionality shift because I accidentally click on the UI and I move some content around. So you notice that there's another panel in here next to the visibility icons to indicate a lock capability. So we can come in and we can do things like, we could lock the cycles group and say, hey, I've turned it off and I don't want it to ever turn back on. This sample that we brought in, the Photoshop file, we've got a number of different layers that we can see in here. So we've got a background layer. It's a 3-screen sample. We've got sort of a time module, and then once we've finished with our time, we're going to get right into washing. So what I want to do is I want to quickly build up those screens. So first, what I want to do is, so you can see the screens as they evolve, I'm going to drop my screen size displayed down a little bit just so we can see everything as it's coming in. I'm going to add in some new screens. The first screen that I want to walk through is I'm going to add in my timer, my time screen here. I'll add in my background layer, and right away I get my new screen. Then we got one final screen that we want to add, which is the final washing layer. Let's put that in along with its background layer. And now I've got the bones of my application. Right away, again, very quick, very easy, working with content. I don't know anything about, Photoshop. This is the content I've received directly from my graphical designer and, some guidelines on how they expect the workflow to go. Once I've got this plumbed in, the first thing I'd like is I've got these screens, I'd like to put in some navigation support to run between them. So I have these next, back buttons, and you'll see if we look at the Actions panel that each of these buttons has already been pre-configured with some visual representation, right? And that's coming directly from our Photoshop file. That's using the naming conventions that we have that allow you to establish things like buttons, groupings, which layers contents are going to line on. Whoops, get rid of that webcam. What I want to do is I'm going to take advantage of one of the new features that we've added in to this release, right? We're going to group select. We're going to say I'd like to add in a screen transition action on these 3 controls, right? This screen transition action is going to be something that's going to allow us to move from one screen to the next, allow us to kind of shift back and forth. And we can do a quick filtering in here. You can tell that I've been working in this workspace before because I've got some events that have already filtered through. And in this case, I'm going to use a screen path transition. Because I'm applying this to several different controls at the same time, I'm going to pick one screen for it to go to, but that screen may not be the one that I want for all the other transitions. Right? So now I can see here is I've got 3 different actions, all screen path transitions. I don't really like the name of these screens, so let's first fix that and make this is my time screen, and this will be my wash screen. I change the names. And we'll leave our main screen listed as that. Now I can go through and I can say, well, on this button, right, what I really like is I'd like for this screen path action to change me not from there to my main screen, but to the time screen. So I'm going to evolve from here to here. Then this back button has an action which is going to take me back to the main screen. That's fine. And my next button here, what I'm interested in here is this one would let's move that to the wash screen. So what I've got is I plumbed in actions for those first 3 operations. Let's see how that looks. I can hit the simulate button here up the top, and now I can actually see that I'm into 3 quick screen transitions. Now those are ugly screen transitions. Those aren't at all what I would like to see. So what I could do is I could come into each one of these individual screen actions, right, screen path actions, or I can take advantage of a new storyboard feature to allow us to find all these actions, right? It's a bit clumsy to kind of come in here and try and group select, so let's go and do a storyboard search. The storyboard search panel you see is changed. We've made some modifications to the search panel so that you can now list specific render extensions or specific actions that you're trying to search through. In my case, I'd like to search for all the screen path actions, right? These are the ones that are actually causing my screen transition. And let's go and actually apply that search right now. And here I can see I've got 2 next buttons and my back button. The nice thing here is that having these actions right here in the screen path allows me to multi-select them right in place. So I can come through and I can change the attributes. So the first thing is, I think I'd like only the changed layers to move. So I'm going to change that to be the delta. The top wasn't really the slide in that I wanted. I think, I would like it to kind of move left. And the duration was a little bit too fast, so I'm going to move that to about 700 milliseconds. Right? Giving that, I can kind of run quickly through a simulation again. Say next, back, next, next. So things are now moving the way I'd like, but they're not necessarily all going the right direction. I think that these next buttons should probably be transitioning not from the left, but from the right. So let's see what that looks like. Right? Next, back, next, next. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So let's zoom in. Now I've got the structure. I've got the ability to navigate set up. Let's zoom in a little bit more. Let's take a look at one of these screens here. I'm going to change my viewpoint back to 100% so I can take a look. So here I've got something on my main screen which looks like, kind of the intent was I want to have 3 radio buttons, right? I kind of want a hot, cold, or warm selection, right? I only want to make one of these 3 selections. So historically, you could definitely go through and you could make that logic, put that logic into Lua, use data changes, manipulate it any way you wanted. But since this is a Storyboard 5 webinar and I want to kind of show you some of our new features, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a component. So down here in our components panel, you can see by default, I don't have any components associated with this project. I'd like to come in and import some of our pre-built components. So I'm just going to take them all in. I'm going to bring them all in. When I do that, I get new components showing up here that are essentially, sort of reusable elements. So if I wanted, for example, a checkbox, I could bring out, kind of a checkbox element here. In my case, right, I think what I'd like to have is something that looks like a radio button. So I'll pull out this simple radio button instead. When I bring that out, what I get is, you can see over here in the application model, I get the structure of a sample, right? A radio button group here, along with a control called button 1, a callback function, and some toggle information. And this, you can see that the icon is reconfigured a little bit differently from a standard group, right? This is the standard group that you see down here. And that's because we've identified this, because of the callback function, because of the structure of the elements, as a component. So we can actually, what we can do is we can hide the component content so we can actually slim down the UI presentation when you're using these things. Now, unfortunately, this is an awfully small radio button. It doesn't really look like it's going to fit for here. But I like the concept of it. So why don't we get rid of that? I'll just delete that. And instead, let's use this as the basis for my design, right? So I'm going to edit this simple radio button. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new radio button that is more appropriately sized for these rings that I've got. So my rings, we'll just keep in mind, are 95 by 95. So let's go and edit this radio button. Let's reconfigure it and make it our own. So when you edit a component, what you're doing is you're placed into a temporary development environment, right? We've created a temporary working environment for you to add, remove content, change properties. So what I can do here now is I can look at this control, and just like you would in a normal storyboard design environment, I can take a look and say, well, this control, I'd really like it to be sized up to be 95 by 95. Now, clearly, I'm in a design environment where we had to guess what the layer size would be for us to work with. That's no longer suitable, so let's just reorigin this information right here, right, just so we kind of get ourselves in a good working space. Make this 100. by 100, right? So now I've got my button. I've changed the attributes on it. If I look and see what would happen, this button is composed of an outside radius marker and an inside fill. So if I were to change the value of this to be 255, I can see what the radio button itself would look like. We're putting this around a ring, so instead of a fill, what I really think is I'd like to have a line and maybe a kind of a 9 width. And instead of being this blue, let's make this black, right? So now what I've got is a new template, and I just hit, it's my finger memory. I just hit save automatically on my keyboard, and I get a confirmation. I'm in a template editor. If I'm about to save this, then probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to overwrite and change the content to the original template. Is that something I want to do? Not at all. Not what I want to do. So instead, what I would like to do is I'd like to save this as a brand new template, right? So I'm going to call this my washer radio, right? Because it's a specialized radio button specifically designed for my washing machine, right? Actually, we'll just call it wash radio instead of washer. How about wash radio? When I say OK, I'm prompted to save resources, make some adjustments for this. I'm going to include the same baseline scripts that were being used for the original template, and I'll go ahead and save that. And you'll see now in my component list down here that I now have this new wash radio button. And that's fantastic, right? Because now I can drag this out and I can kind of place it up here and say that's about where I'd like it to be. And let's just make some adjustments here, right? We'll finesse this around a little bit. And the way our radio buttons work is that I can simply copy them and it's faster when you use the keyboard. Paste, right? So now I've got 3 radio buttons inside this group. I can pull them out, right? We can see and we can more or less place them. And what I'll do is, because I know my graphic designer likes things to be lined up, I'm going to just finesse this along a little bit here. And now I've got 3 radio buttons ready to go. Now, unfortunately, I inherited the alpha value across all 3 of them. It wasn't really my intention. So I'll make this change right now. There we go. So now when I simulate, what I've got here is sort of a radio button behavior that I get for free. Now, we're not perfectly aligned here. Looks like I need to do a little bit of work. The other thing is, I'm not really thrilled about this whole gray line here. That's not really kind of what my graphic design intent was. So let me first fix the alignment here, boost that up, and let's go in and re-edit our radio button. Let's fix a few things here. So the first thing I can fix inside of here is I can change this alpha back to 0, and that's fine. That'll work fine. And before I save it, what I'd like to do is let's change this outline. Let's make this outline white. That's kind of more in line with our design intent. Now when I say save, absolutely, I want to update the content originally, and I'm going to push this through. Now what I get is I have the same presentation here. I've got an updated template here, an updated component. I can push this to all the existing instances by calling update instances. What it's going to do is that's going to go into my design and say, well, here's places where you've used this component before. Do you want to update those places? I'll say, absolutely. That's definitely what I would like to do. Now, you can see the visual presentation changed here. Now, because what we had was, the radio button is a bit of a specialized component because you're expected to add more items inside of it. So we can't predict how many more items we've got. But what we do have is we have a facility for quickly taking those changes and propagating them across. So we can simply copy that control, and I can group select these two other controls, and what I can do is, whoops, back here. I can group select those two other controls, and I can say edit, paste, replace controls, and what that's going to do is it's going to take the attributes from what I just copied and paste them across, right? And again, now in our simulation world, we can come in, and I've got something which looks pretty nice, flows really well. Super. Now, the thing about components, right, I mentioned that we had these callback functions. So with components, ideally what you're doing is you're abstracting away some logic behavior, something like a checkbox or a radio button or a slider, and you're taking that functionality and you're saying, well, the UI management is in one place, and then what I would like to do is I'd like to have my Lua management, for the actual action that goes associated with the component somewhere else. So in this case, what I would like is I can select the component, and I can see that there's a callback property listed. So what I can do is let's set that callback just so you get an idea of what's going on here, right? So I can say callback set wash temp, right? This is a Lua file that's going to be invoked whenever I change my radio button. Now, I don't really want, if I look at what's in my scripts view, you'll see in the application model, part of our restructuring is that we actually have a broken out section for our scripts. I don't have a Lua file that's not associated with the components yet. So I'd like to create a new Lua file, and I'll call this callbacks, just to stay with our convention of where we put our callback functions. And now in here, I can say, here's my callback function. What I get as the parameters is going to depend on every single component, right? Every single component is going to potentially have a different, kind of a different mechanism for sending you information. In our case, with the radio button, what we get is we get the ID and the control that was selected. So we're not really building a washing machine, so what I'll do here is I can just plumb in and say, this is button, right, just to kind of give you an idea of what this would look like if you were doing this live. We'll go and we'll save our changes, and now we can see here, coming out of my console, button 1, button 2, button 3, and so on. So now I can map these into the actual behavior that I want, right? If I was going through, I could take this same component, and I can reuse it now as is, and I can apply it to my temperature screen, right? So I come down here, and I can take my wash radio, I can bring it out and apply it in exactly the same fashion down here as I did before. Copy, paste, paste, take those elements, bring them over, align them, line them up, and then here's my 1, 2, and 3 here. I can do is spread them out. That's not what I wanted. Not that spread, this spread. Spread them out, and then top a line, right? So quickly, I can kind of plumb in the same functionality using my generic wash radio button functionality that I put in. So that's good. So we've got kind of two of our screens, kind of mostly plumbed up as user interaction is concerned. Let's go to our last screen, on the wash screen, because here I'm going to come in, and for those of you who are new to Storyboard, working with animations is generally fairly simple, right? There's a lot of complexity that can go into building an animation if you're doing this in code, but what Storyboard does is Storyboard makes it a very straightforward, simple operation for you to just come in, grab components, move them around, slide them around, and show them. So what I would like to do as a design intent is I can see that my designer's given me this file, and what they would like is presumably for this bar to slide across and represent progress. It's a washing machine. I also think the washing machine should have something that kind of jiggles and agitates, so I'm going to put something in that does that too. So the easiest way to get started with an animation, of course, is our animation recorder. So this little green button up here, you'll notice that some of our icons have all kind of changed and normalized. We're going to start by turning on our animation record, and then I can take this bar here, and I'm just going to simply drag it all the way over to the end. Now, that didn't really have the effect I was hoping for, but, you know, the control is that big, so I suspect that there's some issues with the artwork. We'll deal with that in a second. Second, I can come here, and I'd like this little washing machine, this icon, to spin around, right, and change. So I'm going to take that, and I'm going to come in, and I'm going to change the rotation value to, let's just make it do a full circle, right, as part of my animation. With that done, I can say I'm finished, and we'll call this wash progress. I'm given the name of the animation, what I'd like to do, the frame rates for it, and again, none of this is all locked in, right? What you're seeing here is functionality that you can certainly change afterwards, right? It's really kind of what you do to get your default settings going. So once I'm finished doing that animation record, I land in my animation timeline. In my animation timeline, I can start customizing this and changing it. But the first thing I'd like to do is actually see what it looks like. So I can hit the preview button here that's in the timeline, and without even going out to the simulation environment, I can actually see what my animation looks like. Now, I said I wanted my water to agitate a little bit. That doesn't look a little bit. That looks like a lot of agitation. So what happened here is that if I look at the property on this, I can see right away, right, that this image was imported, but it wasn't imported so that I could start spinning it around and changing it. So I'll change those attributes on the image to say center, so that I get a bit of a smoother look, and that's a lot better now, right? Get a nice smooth spin cycle. Now, the other problem is that I'm running this animation on this piece, but this bar is not filling the way I expect it to. And that's because if I take a look, this is a fixed image that's going on in here, right? I can see what that looks like in my images view by kind of right-clicking on the chevron icons and saying, you know, I'd like to go and see the selection. And I can see here, if I look at my image attributes, where's my properties here? Oh, where'd they go here? There we go, properties. I can see this is a fixed size, right? And this is not any bigger than what you see here. So we can fix that because this is really should be a scalable image. I want this to be something which grows and shrinks as I try and make the progress. So I'm going to convert that to a 9-patch image, right? A 9-patch image is a scalable bitmap format, essentially defines the corners of your image, and once you do that, then you've got the ability to take it and scale it. So the other thing is, let's put it and start it as a 0 width. So with it converted to 9-patch, now what we should be able to see is a nice, smooth progress, right? Now our animation's starting to come together. This is starting to look pretty good, right? It's a little bit fast, so let's scale that up. Maybe let's take this guy and let's make it a second in duration. And actually, the other thing I'd like is I'd like my wash to agitate. You know, so you're looking at a washing machine. It kind of goes one way for a little while, then goes the other way for a little while. So let's take our rotation here, and I'm just going to double-click to clone that block across. Right. So now I've got 2 blocks, and let's change the way that runs. Right. I'm going to say take it from the current value, and then I want to apply an offset of minus 360 degrees. So essentially I'm going to spin it around one way, and then I'm going to stop and spin it around the other way. If we look at it, what it looks like, too fast for me. Current value, and let's slow this down. Let's actually make it run. Let's make it expand out. We're going to scale our animation. Let's scale this out to 5 seconds, right? Give us a little bit more time to look at it, right? And run it. There we go. Now we can see it's going all the way around one way and all the way around the other. Now, the thing is this wouldn't be a Storyboard 5 demonstration if I didn't show you some Storyboard 5 features. So one of the things that you may have noticed in the properties looking at the animation blocks here is that we've changed the visual representation of what the rates look like. We still have all the standard rates that we've always had, but now we also have the ability to redefine those rates. So my first thing is my water shouldn't actually just kind of, flow around like that. It's not really a linear thing. So let's try an ease in curve, right, and see what that looks like in my preview. No, that doesn't really look right either, right? I'm finicky, right? Lots of graphic design guys are finicky. They want to get just the right curve. So what you can do here is now you can come in and you can actually take this, and you'll notice that I'm multi-selected, so I'm applying this change to both of these blocks. I'm going to take it, I'm going to massage this animation rate, right? So this is a nice little cubic Bezier curve editor. You can put in your parameters. If you've got parameters specifically that you're looking for, you can just plunk that in. Once I'm happy with that rate, I'll save that. That's a kind of a new custom rate. I could have given it a name. Let's see what it looks like, right? So now I've got this spin. It's kind of whipping around, kind of the water gets to the top, whips around back. That looks better. I like that. It looks good. And again, this is all translated. We're simulating here within the design environment, but of course, once we actually get live on the target, we want to see it here. So we need to put in something to kick off that animation. So when we come into the screen right away, I'm going to add in an animation action that's going to start that. So on a screen show, right, this is what happens when you come into the screen. We can launch our animation, and we'll call it watch progress. So away we go. I can do a quick simulation on the platform that I'm running on here, which is my desktop, and now I can see that I'm slowly working through here, right? Looks good. What about this pause button? We've got this great big huge pause button, right? Seems to me like we should be able to pause the animation. Great news. Previously, if you were trying to pause an animation in Storyboard, you'd go through a lot of lengths. What you have to do is more or less, kind of cancel it, save where you're at, craft your animations so that you could kind of get it restarted, do a lot of variable manipulation. We recognized that was a pain. That wasn't really, helping you speed things up. So what we've done is we've put in a series of new animation actions and consequently animation events to allow you to pause, resume, and also stop, right? So stopping is different from pausing, right? So you can pause it and you can restart it. You can pause it, you can resume it, or you pause it and stop it altogether. These actions are available both as commands as well as through our Lua API. So let's put a pause on this watch progress, right? We can do that. And, if we're going to pause, we might as well resume. So I'll copy this here. I got to make sure that I always copy and paste using the menu, because otherwise my moderator gets really angry with me, and I don't want her to be angry with me. All right, resume control, right? So I take the same action, and instead of an animation pause, what I'm going to do is I'll do an animation resume, and that's great. Let's just align these two things so they're sort of sitting one on top of the other. There and there. And let's change the words pause, make this resume. And we got something funny going on here. Oh, we got some strange offsets. Let's make that 0, 0, 0, and then match and match. There we go. Now we can see our text properly. There we go. So now we've got a pause and we have a resume. By default, I'd like my resume to be hidden, and then when I press pause, I will have a data change action here. Let me go in and create an action that is on a press. We'll do a data change, and I'm going to use not a context relative key for resume because I'm putting it on two different controls. Hidden, finish, finish. So now I've got, you can see here, pause, the data change, and I can change the hidden state to be off, and then on my resume, I've got a data change, and I'm going to make it hidden again, right? So with this in place, we should be totally set to select our temperature, select our time. My circle's off a little bit there. I need to fix that. Pause our animation, resume it, pause it, resume it, pause it, resume it, pause it. Pretty awesome stuff. right? A lot easier than some of the things you had to do in the past. So just, you can see here, we're a little 45 minutes in, a few minutes of slide work, and I've already got something which, is a good step towards building up the user interface for my washing machine. But, we've got more in Storyboard 5. Because what would a washing machine be if you couldn't watch a movie while your stuff was washing, right? So part of what I said, the new features that we've got in Storyboard 5 is we've got the ability to do video playback, right? Oh, wait. Before we do that, I'm totally off track. Before we add video, let's simulate this on the target. I almost forgot that I've got these webcams going here. Let's get a webcam down to an embedded target. So what I've got here is I have an IMX6 dual light. Is that right? Is that what I wrote down here? And I've got a webcam set up for it. I'd like to be able to run this. I'm seeing it simulated on my desktop here, right? What I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to push this Storyboard simulator configuration right down to that target. So let me close this off. Previously, we had export configurations for Android, iOS, gap exporting, C, C++ header files. We had all these different export configurations, and they all took you through a very similar code path. You can still get at those export options by doing a right-click on a GDE file export. But what it's going to do is it's going to take you into completely revamped and reworked dialog, right? This dialog is really designed to streamline our export process and allow us to be able to reuse it for a number of different configurations, right? So your standard export process for an embedded target is going to be you're using a Storyboard engine gap file and you're going out to a file system, right? This is the same export process we've always used. What I'm interested in doing is I would like to expand that. I'd like to do an SCP transfer, right? So what I want to do is I actually want to connect over to this host that I'm running on. So this is me SSH'd into my Linux host. Now, if you're a graphic designer, you're probably not going to be SSH'd into your Linux host. Instead, what you're going to have is you'll have an IP configuration that someone's set up for you, and the ability to log in and kind of kick off a launch script, right? This launch script is really just burying the Storyboard engine launch configuration details. And what I can do is I can apply this change, right? I say, this is the washing machine I'd like to push out. If I go and I take a look at my webcam here, let's see if we can pull this all off at the same time, and I say run, what's going to happen is that my content is going to be transferred across over SCP, right? Oh, let me go and adjust. Oh, we're autofocusing here. We've lost our whiteness. You saw it there for a moment. Let me see if I can drop the brightness. Contrast. Oh, disappeared for a second, and now it's gone. Always the danger. Let me see what happens when I interact with it. Cancel. Minimize that. So what's happened is I've taken my content across, and it's now running here on my board. If I come and I interact with it, let's see if I can. Hard for me to see. It's a little bit washed out. See if we can see what the screen transitions look like. Nope, we're not getting them. Well, that's really too bad. I need to choose some darker colors. Well, you want to take my word for, oh, there we go. Maybe we just need to change the viewing angle on this slightly. How's that? How's that, Jenny? Moderator? Does that look good? I'm getting a thumbs up. Okay, so let's do this all over again so we can actually see it from a better angle. So what I can do is I can hit that export configuration. I can go over SCP. I can say I'd like to go ahead and run it. It's going to go through and restart my application. Now you can see here. And it's running and interacting exactly the way we built it. Now, we built it for a screen that was slightly larger, so our screen transitions are not quite, they're kind of bleeding over the edge here a little bit, you see. But the exciting thing here is that not only can our designers now work, simulate, get a real experience on the desktop of an application that's live and running, but they can, with very minimal effort, now take it and export it out to an embedded target, right? We're going to look at some of the other changes that we can put in here too. Just while we're in this dialog, this export dialog, you'll see this is where you would also create your Windows launchers, your standalone executables. I'm on a Macintosh system, so the Macintosh systems can do some things like build native iOS applications that the Windows platforms can't. And similarly, creating a standalone Windows executable is something that can be done from Windows but not from macOS. You also see here our options for creating a storyboard compressed package. And this is what I was talking about when we were running through the slides about a single export file that contains all of your graphical content, your assets, your fonts, your resources. All right? Different from what we put out as our RTOS SDK, C and C++ header file content. So all of the standard configurations here have different options, different configuration pieces to them. But the nice thing is they're all brought together in a unified environment. Future releases of Storyboard are going to allow you to drive all this configuration from the command line. So once you put together a configuration, then you'll be able to do any of these exports in a unified fashion. So, yeah, go ahead and let's not save those. So I was mentioning we have other samples, we have other pieces that we've been working hard on bringing into Storyboard, and one of those pieces is the ability to show video in kind of a comprehensive fashion. So for that, rather than start from a Photoshop content, I'm going to go to a new project here and I'm going to import a sample, and that sample will be a video sample, right? It's our media sample. And it's going to tell me my location is already in use because someone was doing work this morning. So let's just quickly ratify that and get rid of our media directory here. Move that media directory to trash, and now we should be able to come in and import our sample project here. One of the things you'll notice in our Storyboard samples is that we've set it up so that we have a growing list of samples demonstrating different things, different techniques, and we're really focusing on building this up as a library of functionality that you can draw on. So, for example, our media sample here is going to be a very simple media player. You can see here it's using our external buffer technology, and it's communicating using our media plugin to a variety of backends. Could be the GStreamer hardware backend. In this case, what we're going to be seeing is an automatic launch of the Big Buck Bunny, reference video playing here on my Mac, right, using Software Runner. The cool thing is that I can take this and I could turn it into, for example, a component. It looks like someone's already done that. Someone's already turned this into a component. Oh. Oh dear. Looks like we may have triggered something in Storyboard here, sending us off the rails. Let me do a quick force quit on that. That's a leftover component that shouldn't be there. Media.sbat. Okay. Let's quickly relaunch our designer. So as I mentioned, we're not quite done with Storyboard 5. It'll be coming out in the next few weeks. It's kind of going through its final testing efforts at this point. So let's come back to our project navigator here. We've got a media project, and let's delete that, and we'll just kind of re-kick this off. Delete the location. Perfect. Right? So back over. Bring our sample in. Media. Okay, back to our media sample. So now this is the one I want here. What I can do is I can create a component very, very quickly. Right? So components are neat this way because even though we're going to be shipping and providing you with a number of different components for standard type of controls, checkboxes, radio, list, they're never going to be exactly what you want. When you get into your design environment, you're going to want to do something different. So in our component world here, we can create a new component very quickly. I'm going to call this my video player component. And I'm going to be asked about what resources I am working with. Well, I want to have the media actions, so I'm going to take those templates, and I would also like to have a video, so I'm going to pull that in too. What that does is that creates a module here that includes everything we're using in this sample. Now I can do this. I can come over to my washing machine, and I can say, well, on the wash screen, while it's coming up and playing, why don't I put in a video, right? So I can come to my media. Here's the component that we made, our video player component. I can simply copy this and place this into our templates directory, and you'll see now I've got a video player down here, right? So components are files. They can be transferred around and moved around very easily. Take this video player out. Come back to our application model. So I've got this external buffer. Let's put it in behind everything else here. And then what we'll do is we'll kind of align it on the screen. Top align, there we go. So now I've got the ability to have this video player here. I need an action to kick it off. I can come over to the media player and I can just steal the action out of here. So I look at the selection of different actions. Here's my new video action with all the parameters. So I can simply copy that. And we'll paste it on our screen here. Edit, paste. And now I've got this new video action on my wash screen. Now what happens when I simulate? So I come through here. And now I've got this video player running in the background. Now, I presumably don't want this. If you had some sort of a nice video animated background that you wanted all throughout your application, that would work fine here. You could use it for that effect. In this case, I really kind of just want to watch a movie while my laundry's being done. So let's just pull this out, right? Kind of size it up to be maybe 320 by 180. How's that look? Kind of nice. Just stick that there. So 320, 180, one of the parameters that we have on the action here is what size the video is going to be. So we're going to align those. And now, again, simulation. I'm able to come in. I've got my movie playing here. My animations are still running. Everything is going smoothly. What's even more impressive is that I should be able to take this and push it down to the target, right? So I come into my washing machine configuration. Now, the original export I didn't have all these assets, right? So I want to make sure that I come over and I grab the assets to ensure that it has access to the video that I want to play. I come back over here, and I apply this, say run, and we come back over to our webcam, and we get a small, quick reboot. We're back up and running, right? We're still running. We're still live. And now you can see here, on my embedded target, all the same functionality, right? Pretty exciting, right, what you can do with these components. So I have a couple of other technologies to touch on, just, as we're wrapping up. I want to leave a few minutes for questions if there are any at the end. Other samples that we've got that are demonstrating interesting technology. Those are going to be things that are brand new for us, right? One of the brand new features that you'll see is this notion of a canvas, right? Being able to pull in a canvas control, which is a blank slate. So we have a sample for that. This is our charting and graphing with canvas. This is a brand new render extension. Oh, I'm going to run into the same difficulty here. C5. Clearly didn't clean up my workspace appropriately. So let's try that again. My graphing with canvas, pull that in. And what this is this is a render extension very much like our external buffer render extension. It's a named entity, but the way in which you interact with a canvas is by using Lua APIs to perform the raw drawing operations. Now, this is a functionality which is still in its infancy, so we're relatively light on the primitives that we're supporting, right? You can do lines and fills and recs, but already you can do a fair amount. The idea here is not to replace. We're not trying to get you to draw your UI with Canvas. Really what we want here is this is a solution for people who they're looking to do things like charting, right? Things where I have a bunch of data and I would like to present it, and there's no generic charting widget that we could provide that would ever be customizable the way you want. So instead, we're going the route of giving you an API in which you can actually draw on your content, right? And so, here's a simple example of some line graphs, a variety of different, multiple canvases on the same screen, right? Or even something where we're incorporating some of our components to do data feedback, sliders, and widgets here to actually change the data around. Right? So this is a new component for us. It kind of offers some exciting possibilities, new things that we can do. The other samples that you'll see in here that I won't necessarily go through and bring up, but just to kind of highlight, we get a lot of questions about big lists, scrolling content, data. Our infinite list is a great sample for that. Gestures, how to do multi-touch, how to support multi-touch. We have a couple of different samples in this area. This is a good one. I'll push this right to the board right now, right, so that we can take a look and see what it looks like. This one here, oops, ran the wrong program. Let me just reconfigure that. SCB transfer on the gesture here, and what I would like is I want to go through the gesture and apply, run that. And now what we'll see here is a sample that allows us to do two-finger movements, pinches, zooms, right, rotations, and tracking, for example. Oh, not quite able to get my two swipes in the same thing. So this is, a good reference if you're looking to see how do I actually incorporate this functionality into my own product. How can I use the Storyboard APIs for that? That's a great sample. And as always, we're not just about the 2D aspects. We're working, sort of improving our 3D capabilities at the same time, but trying to do it in a way that is not overwhelming and turning us into a full 3D modeling tool. And for that, what I'd like to do is I'm going to open up a project from a file system. This is a new functionality introduced in this version of Storyboard. It allows you to actually pull a sample directly from a position on disk and work with it. We have a robot arm demo. This will be available in our SVN repository. It's a pretty nifty demo. I have to say, we have some medical customers who are doing work in this area. We've done some surgical robots, some industrial control, but this is really our first sample that's kind of showcasing all of our capabilities. So I run it. What you'll see here is you'll see an articulated robot arm, right, this is a 3D model object. This came from an FBX file as an import, and now we're using standard storyboard animations, standard storyboard functionality to manipulate various components of the model, right, hide and show nodes, to be able to manually, manually perform operations on those nodes, right, change things around. Change the viewports, right? This is really leveraging the capabilities that we have in terms of our OpenGL rendering. And of course, this all runs on the target as well, right? So I can actually take this down and push it to my target, and using the same easy functionality, I'm going to take a second here because it's a little bit larger. Shut down and load. Perhaps. Are we actually live? Oh, no, that one is still live. Let me just double check. We actually had the configuration option properly set. Our robot arm, 800 by 480. Let's get rid of this one. What I would like is that one. select as our primary, and SB launch. There we go. Change our launch script. Try that now. There we go. And now we can go to our webcam here. Our webcam view. And resize that. And you can see the same demo project, same model, running in the same environment here. And this is running our embedded target. Let me turn off our anti-focus or focuses. Setting us apart here. Too much movement on screen for our screen cam as our robot starts dancing on its own. So, with that image of a dancing robot, I think that I've kind of covered through some of the most significant parts of Storyboard 5. I've taken us through a design example using our standard Photoshop import, but then leveraging some of the new Storyboard 5 functionality. We've looked at our target export, our deployment with SCP. We've touched on some of the new capabilities in terms of charting and kind of our graphing, some of the multi-touch capabilities. And now we're watching a robot dance in the background. Like, Storyboard 5 is pretty awesome. And my moderator's laughing at me right now. So I guess at this point in time, I've kind of gone a few minutes over my hour mark. If there are any questions, I'd certainly be happy to entertain them.
Yes, we do have a few questions.
Let me see how I get to my questions. Q&A. Perfect. All right, questions. So let's take a look and see. Link to recorded video. Yes, so the link will be provided to the recorded video. It will certainly be online afterwards. We'll be sharing the webinar. Is EXE exported just for desktop Windows? Does it support Windows CE application deployment as well? No, at this point in time, it is really just a Windows desktop environment exporter. It is something that we are exploring for other platforms, Linux desktop. It is meant to be a more, we'll consider it a collaboration tool rather than a deployment tool. It's relatively straightforward to create a batch file that encompasses what's going on inside of the EXE, so we don't feel like the overhead of unpacking on a Windows CE target is probably in our best interest at this time. But if there's something that you're specifically interested in, by all means, contact us and we'll have that discussion. If I'm developing on Linux, yeah, so I think I answered that. Will the video player run on Windows Embedded Compact 2013? At this point in time, the video player is configured for Linux platforms, Mac platforms, QNX platforms. It is not being configured for Windows platforms. If there is interest in doing that, we can certainly explore it. Windows also has its own video backend that we are exploring integrating with rather than providing just a software decode. What we'd be interested in is certainly hearing from people who are interested in that technology and what the fit would be for their products. Someone's asking whether or not we can run two instances of Storyboard on the same box and drag and drop features from one to the other. So running two instances of Storyboard on the same box is certainly applicable. Dragging and dropping features from one to the other depends on what the functionality is, right? Depends on what the features are. If these are file assets, then absolutely you certainly can. If they are not file assets, if they are model objects or elements, then no, that's not something that's possible. Certainly, if you're interested in doing that, there's a very quick way to incorporate content from one workspace to another, so you can just bring it in that environment rather than running two full-blown Storyboard instances. the overhead of 2 storyboard instances is actually can be quite large compared to just having multiple projects within the same workspace. For the average engineer, how long might it take for the person to learn this tool to become reasonably proficient? This is a great question because it's not really a question about engineering or it's more a question of sort of aptitude and interest. So we regularly have co-op students that are coming in to do sort of support and development terms at Crank. And one of the very first things that we do within the first week is that we will ask you to use Storyboard to build up an application. And within the first week of sort of spending time with Storyboard, they are able to build a very meaningful application. It's not a complicated design environment. There's a lot of functionality to it, but to be able to put together rudimentary UIs to actually get started, we have a very low barrier to entry, right? A quick ramp time. As you get more time in the tool, of course, you realize that there's more and more that you can do. All the time spent on development. It would be nice to see features on an actual user interface. I'm not sure, sort of the question here. We're actually talking about deploying on targets right now. Certainly that was something that was kind of covered more at the end, but that's because Storyboard is a design suite, right? So the design suite means that you're spending a lot of time doing the design and development, and the runtime engine component is something which is fairly generic and across multiple different platforms. Certainly we are exploring the idea of putting together a target-specific optimization and tuning webinar. And if that's something that you're interested in, you should definitely contact us because we'd like to hear more about what you'd like to see. Let me just take a look through some of the other questions here. What do we got going on? Magnitude of change. Do you have libraries for more readily available target boards, STM, F7? So the availability of Storyboard and what comes in our standard distribution is catered towards being able to provide an out-of-the-box development platform that you can run on standard systems. So depending on the platform that you're running on and the operating systems that typically are used for it, that dictates kind of how easy it is to get up and running. So a platform like the STM typically is going to be supported by real-time executive operating systems like FreeRTOS, MQX, or UC Linux. In those environments, it's a little bit more difficult to make something which is totally generic. So we do have an evaluation image that is available for the STM platform. It does use the file system support for loading. So it will be updated for 5.0. All of our standard images will be updated for 5.0. If there is a target evaluation platform that you find particularly compelling that you'd like to see Storyboard running on, it's a very small effort for us to spin something up. Generally, the barrier is us actually having the hardware in-house because we don't typically like to release things that we don't get to test and see ourselves. People asking about the cost of license and development, I would redirect your questions to sales@cranksoftware.com, and we'll be happy to talk about pricing and our costing model. I don't see any other
Did have one more here that came in through the chat. The Storyboard worked with some of the lower end chips such as ARM M4.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Really, the gating factor is less about processor speed. It's more a matter of what resources you have available, right? So depending on the user interface that you're interested in running, that user interface may have a requirement for a certain amount of RAM, certain amount of static flash memory to be able to store the assets. We've run in configurations as low as sort of a megabyte of heap in terms of dynamic memory. It is a conversation which doesn't have a generic answer, unfortunately. But yes, we are running on the platform, those lower M4 class platforms that have display controller support. So if that's it, I'll jump back to our our last slide of the deck here. Let me put away the dancing robot. If you have questions or you'd like to learn more, certainly try our 30-day evaluation of Storyboard. The evaluation that's currently posted is our 421 evaluation. We are expecting Storyboard 5 to be released within the coming weeks. If you have particular questions that weren't answered by the webinar or things that you'd like to ask, support@cranksoftware.com or sales@cranksoftware.com are both avenues for you to direct those questions. I think that's it. Thank you very much for attending, and have a fantastic day.